I like to call on divine spirit, the giver of life, the creator of all that is, of all that was and will forever be, for this moment of sharing with all of my sisters and brothers, beings of light, who are here on the planet Earth, giving respect to the Earth Mother, to all of our guides, and to all of the nations that were here before us, as the keepers of the land. And I ask Divine Spirit to hold us cohesively as one, so that the Divine Spirit can move through us to help heal the wounds of our society, and that not one person is left behind, that we, in a very humble way, do the divine service of joining hands to create the world that we all want to live in, and that we can be protected against any of the injustices and any of those lower beings who want to divide and conquer us. I give thanks and praises that the indigenous people of this land are standing together, and that all of us that are here, the indigenous people of civilization, of all people, we all too are here, that we are holding our hands together. We have joined hands to create a circle of enlightenment, of strength, of intelligence, of love, of wealth, and fairness, equity, and sharing. And so that the divine spirit can move us forward and work through us and bring forth a divine inner and understanding of who we are and how to serve each other in the divine spirit. So thank you all again for being here. Thank you, divine spirit. Bless all of our children. We thank you for our ancestors and for the guidance that you are showing us today. And so it is.
And so it is. Thank you, Nana Karantama, for helping open the way to this important conversation, this convening of family from across the planet today on this sacred occasion, as every day is absolutely a sacred occasion. I'd like to go ahead and just welcome everybody to this conversation. For those who are going to tune into this when they check the video recording of this important conversation, I want to say welcome to everybody tuning in around the world. I want to mention that Chief Phil Lane Jr. was going to be with us today, but due to some connectivity issues, we may see him at some point in the future of this conversation, and at the same time we might not. But nevertheless, I send him peace and blessings to he and his family where they're at currently. And there's so much to say and share about Chief Phil. He's definitely been a major influence in my life. Certainly, I know in Ruben's life as well, and our work together. And I know Mama Audrey has a long history also of working with Chief Phil Lane directly. One interesting thing to, I guess, ground is that one of the reasons we were inspired to come together today in conversation is because, well, I mean, for a few reasons. One being the recent announcement made by the Holy See, the Catholic Church, the Vatican Press, releasing their announcement of repudiating the Doctrine of Discovery, which on its face sounds like a very strong word. Yet, as we also know with the language of the lexicon, things can be very slick and tricky. So I know that their stance, at least at this point in this truth and reconciliation process, has them declaring a repudiation, which is, in a way, excusing themselves, maybe even absolving themselves of responsibility or accountability with the use of a very highbrow terminology. We'll get into that in a little bit, but moreover, to ground this, one of the reasons that it was compelled upon me to pull this together at such short notice, after hearing about that announcement on Thursday, the 30th of March, 2023, a couple of days ago, was because in the year 2014, myself, at the call of Audrey Scott Williams and our brother Alejandro, if I'm not mistaken, as well as Chief Phil Lane and Dr. Barbara Wallace, were all present at a very important gathering in Northern California of traditional leaders and healers from around the world. I think we were 33 in count if we counted the two young people that were also at that gathering, one of them being Chief Phil's son, Tiger, and the other being Takaya Blaney. So just acknowledging them, and that for me personally really set forth the commitment as part of that coming together, where we declared part of the mission of the Hidden Seeds gathering was to advance and promote the denouncing of the Doctrine of Discovery and the associated Papal Bulls. And this again was in late June 30th through July 3rd in the year 2014. And what was very interesting is after putting those intentions out there, those declarations that we really ceremonialized in a very deep and special way with the support of United Religions Initiative, URI, and the Global Indigenous Initiative of URI, that set some things in motion, maybe in the ether or maybe in the energetic, that then would lead to a couple of years later an active revoking of sorts by the interfaith community, calling to task the Catholic Church to again revoke and denounce the Doctrine of Discovery, as interfaith clergy were gathered at Standing Rock in solidarity and support with what was happening there here in the United States. That was 2016. Also that year, Ruben and myself initiated something known as the Calendar Referendum Initiative 2020, which has now become the Calendar Referendum Initiative 2028, and Declaration of Universal World Peace. And we launched this very specific petition to change the Gregorian calendar, to shift what is now the calendar standard from the Gregorian calendar to a 13-month, 28-day frequency or calendar, which is a natural timing calendar. It's a basis in biology, it's a basis in the biosphere, and it's even considered better for business, as we do understand the Gregorian calendar tends to, operate or coordinate all the functions of the current world economy to a larger or lesser degree. Then following that, I want to back up because I think very important to note, Dr. Barbara introduced a paper in 2015 that was drawn in part from some of the charge that came out of that gathering that we all attended in 2014, and really taking to task to make the conversation around the Doctrine of Discovery also include coherence around post-traumatic stress disorder, and how the Doctrine of Discovery and those relative Papal Bulls have caused, we could say, to some degree, and hopefully she'll speak to that as we get into the conversation. But on the timeline of events, this is very important to note that there were efforts, and many others. I know if Chief Phil were in the conversation, he would also remark on many, many years before being about helping to try to advance this consciousness, this awareness. So as we can see, it's an ongoing, long game. And now that the Catholic Church has made a statement or released this official announcement about its position of repudiation of the Doctrine of Discovery, there are many conversations among circles like ourselves happening right now as to, okay, what does this mean? What does this mean for where we've come? What does this mean now in holding the church and the institution accountable? And then where do we go? But we'll get into some of that. I'd like to firstly do justice to introduce our panelists with the bios that I do have. And I'll begin with Audrey Scott Williams, if that's all right. And Audrey Scott Williams is the first woman to lead a global walk for human rights and environmental justice. She led the Trail of Dreams World Peace Walk over 6 continents from 2005 to 2009, the 13 Moon Walk for Peace across America to over 50 communities. That was in 2010 and 2011. She led the Red Flame for Freedom movement a national movement to end human trafficking, mass incarceration, and children living in poverty. She currently is the co-founder, director, and visionary for 20 Million Women Strong, and leads the 20 Million Women Strong Cooperation Circle at URI, United Religions Initiative. She served as the interim global indigenous coordinator for the United Religions Initiative in 2013 and 2014, and served as the co-convener of the historic Hidden Seeds Global Indigenous Gathering in Northern California in 2014 that I referenced previously. Audrey currently serves as the spiritual director of the Spiritual Enrichment Center in Dothan, Alabama, and also serves on the board of directors of the Worldwide Indigenous Science Network. Thank you for being here, Audrey.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share Dr. Barbara Wallace's bio as well. Thank you for being here, Dr. Wallace. Dr. Barbara Wallace is a psychologist, tenured professor of health education within the Department of Health and Behavior Studies, Teachers College, Columbia University. In addition, Dr. Wallace is director of the research group on disparities in health. For outstanding and unusual contributions to the field of psychology, she was honored with the status of fellow within both Division 50, Society of Addiction Psychology, and Division 45, Society for the Psychological Study of Culture, Ethnicity, and Race, of the American Psychological Association, APA. She is author of Making Mandated Addiction Treatment Work and editor of Toward Equity in Health, A New Global Approach to Health Disparities, as just two of her acclaimed publications. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Wallace. And I'll also introduce our third panelist, Ruben Ginas. Ruben considers himself a consciousness explorer and a bridge builder between cultures, dimensions, and paradigms. His mission is to support humanity through its evolution with education, awareness, and exploration of practical and inspirational solutions for today's world challenges. Grounded in this perspective, he has been dedicating his life to bring back to humanity ancient time mapping tools, rooted in the application of the advanced calendrical science devised by the ancient Maya of Mesoamerica. As a modern timekeeper, Ruben has been creating new tools and exploring new ways to track and reconstruct the harmonic relationships between cosmic cycles of time. He believes that the integration of these tools can assist us in comprehending the harmonic fractal nature of time and entrain our minds and hearts with the earth, the moon, Venus, and the golden proportion, the mathematical principle present in all nature. Grounded in this perspective, since 2013, Ruben has been creating virtual educational spaces to explore the daily pulse of natural time on Earth in real time. He is also co-founder of the Global Council for Calendar Awareness. So thank you to you all. And again, I want to acknowledge Nana Karantama for blessing us at the beginning with that amazing opening prayer. And I don't have your bio before me, but I certainly would invite you to share a little bit about your work as well, because as you are now in this conversation with us, which is a blessing, I want to make sure that folks can also learn about your important work that is legacy and ongoing. So if you want to offer a couple of comments, Nana Karantama, on yourself, I wouldn't mind. We'll have you come off mute. I'll ask you to unmute there. Oh, I think we might have actually.
Okay, well,
lost her
Nana
there.
Karantama was one of the people who was one of the 33 wisdom keepers or elders that was also present at the 2014 July gathering.
Yes.
And in my document, I make reference to a couple of the books that she has actually brought forth, representing the wisdom of the ablissum, or the deities, or the oracles. And one of them in particular is from the angel Nana Boafo Tigare, who brought forth a book regarding harmony and interdependence, as well as celestial prophecies and other books as well. So basically, she is an Akomfo, which is the best translation is shaman, In fact, she was made in 2002 a king shaman. And she basically represents her spiritual mother and mentor, Nana Akomfohini Akua Paribia, who was one of the greatest matriarchs of the prior century, a dear friend of Ghana's President Kwame Nkrumah, and made several trips to America in search of her lost children who had been enslaved and captured and had reincarnated in urban centers in America. So as a living representative of her spiritual mother and mentor, she's also now known as the Akomfohini. So she makes a great contribution here also in Philadelphia as president of the Asuna Abarade Shrine Incorporated. So it was really great to see that we lost her. Nana Karantama Ayabofo, it was wonderful that we lost you because I got to introduce you. Because you was given a very humble version of nothing about what you do, which isn't appropriate for an Akomfo.
Yes. Yes. Wow. Well, thank you, Dr. Wallace, for that very wonderful introduction of Nana Karantima. And I do recall indeed us all being there together. Thank you for that in 2014 at that very important gathering, Convergence in Northern California in the Napa Valley. So, with that said, and as we find ourselves today looking at this subject of this this joint statement, as it's called, of the Dicasteries for Culture and Education and for Promoting Integral Human Development on the Doctrine of Discovery. That's a mouthful. Integral Human Development on the Doctrine of Discovery. I'm not quite sure what is meant by that statement. It's kind of a loaded cannon a little bit. But with that said, I'd like to actually share some screen, if I might, and then we enter into this dialogue. I want to actually share screen to put forward the actual, if I can pull it up here, let me pull this where we have it. I'm going to share the screen to pull forward the actual document from the Holy See and the Catholic Church. And this, again, was published just a couple of days ago on the 30th of March. And you all should be able to see that now. And we wanted to share this just because I think it's not enough to just say, okay, the statement was made, but I think it's important to actually look at the statement itself on its letterhead and everything, just to really get a better sense of what has been put forward as the church's response now to, I guess, what occurred a year ago with the Truth and Reconciliation delegation from Canada, from the First Nations of Canada, that did visit Vatican City and had audience with the Pope. And this was prior to the Pope coming on his tour then to Canada, July 25th, which happens to be the day out of time in the natural time calendar year. It's the one day before the beginning of the new year. But that day is also dedicated to universal forgiveness. So it's an interesting synchronicity that that day of all days would be the day that the Pope issues his apology to the First Nations in Canada specifically, and that was to deal with the residential schools issue, as well as other layers of issues there, no doubt. But I know that particular apology was presented with that in mind specifically, that it's notwithstanding the many other apologies that could be sought from him, and I know Audrey can talk about that as well a little bit. But I wanted to go and share this document. And as we go through it, let's actually examine this a little bit with a critical eye, because, again, I don't think it's meant for us to simply accept at face value what the Catholic Church has issued. They're, in a way, kind of covering their immediate accountabilities to people that they've made these promises in the now time, but it doesn't excuse the institutional behaviors, of course. So, again, the statement is titled Joint Statement of the Dicasteries for Culture and Education and for Promoting Integral Human Development on the Doctrine of Discovery, 30 of March, 2023. Number one, In fidelity to the mandate received from Christ, the Catholic Church strives to promote universal fraternity and respect for the dignity of every human being. So that is it's a wonderful opening statement, we may say, in terms of the aspiration, the striving for such. Two, and feel free, I want to open the space up as well. I'm going to basically read the first three, and then we'll go on, and maybe we'll have some talk back on the first three, and then we'll go into the rest. Number two, for this reason, in the course of history, the popes have condemned acts of violence, oppression, social injustice, and slavery, including those committed against indigenous peoples. There have been also numerous examples of bishops, priests, women and men, religious and lay faithful, who gave their lives in defense of the dignity of those peoples. 3. At the same time, respect for the facts of history demands an acknowledgement of the human weakness and failings of Christ's disciples in every generation. Many Christians have committed evil acts against indigenous peoples, for which recent popes have asked forgiveness on numerous occasions. I think I'll go on to read number 4, and then we'll maybe see if there's any thoughts to be shared or reflections from the panel. Number 4, in our own day, a renewed dialogue with indigenous peoples, especially with those who profess the Catholic faith, has helped the Church to understand better their values and cultures. With their help, the Church has acquired a greater awareness of their sufferings, past and present, due to the expropriation of their lands, which they consider a sacred gift from God and their ancestors, as well as the policies of forced assimilation, promoted by the governmental authorities of the time, intended to eliminate their indigenous cultures. As Pope Francis has emphasized, their sufferings constitute a powerful summons to abandon the colonizing mentality and to walk with them side by side in mutual respect and dialogue, recognizing the rights and cultural values of all individuals and peoples. In this regard, the Church is committed to accompany indigenous peoples and to foster efforts aimed at promoting reconciliation and healing. Let's stop there for a moment. And I'd like to invite Mama Audrey. Would you like to give some talk back? It's kind of in reflection of the first few we've seen there.
I would. I want to particularly speak to just sort of laying a foundation or a layer that takes us just for a moment outside of the doctrines of discovery to come back in. I think the important thing is to note that in the indigenous realm, and we're all indigenous, we're from this place. It's important for us to know what this place is for us personally, so that we always are clear about the culture, space, and time in which we stand. So I'd like to say that I would like to hold the consciousness as we continue this dialogue that the world and all of its people are intricately woven into this layer that we may call mycelium. We may have different names for it. Nevertheless, the earth is one fiber, one fabric. And when one breaks off, one piece breaks off, it does everything it can to heal and restore. Well, I think that what we saw happen coming into the 1400s globally, particularly the European Empire was on the rise, and there was the notion that there were resources available in other lands that could strengthen and enrichen the European Empire. So as a result of that, we saw a lot of doctrines that were shifted and changed, many having to do with the holy books that were shifted and changed, with practices and demonizing paganism and different practices that were holistic to different communities. I think it's important for us to understand that at that point, the whole European Empire was actually or organizing itself to be a major component, a sort of in charge of the whole world, if you will. And so we saw that in many of the actions, as I said, with the changes in the Holy Bible, which books got into the King James and different versions and which ones did not. Most of the ones did not have to do with the power that we have within ourselves when connected with the Creator and all of creation. So I wanted to give that context, because then in the 1400s, I think the first one may have been in 1452, we began to see these doctrines of discovery coming forward. And there we begin to see a strong marriage of the Christianity that was being brought forward, and also a government. And so this relationship in this context, or at this time, began to also have one other component, or I should say two other components. One, a legalese attached to it, a legal structure beginning to be formed around governance. And then you also saw the other aspect of it, of greed and conquer, this whole idea of the strength of the European empire to conquer the world and basically have all of the wealth. And so it's in that context then that the doctrines of discovery, I think there were through three, perhaps 1450s, 1490s, and then again, I can't remember when the third one happened. But it's important to know that that was a legal instrument. And I think that that's a foundation point for understanding what the Pope Francis said on Thursday. He was not talking about the repudiation so much as he was talking. I mean, he was talking about repudiating, which was canceling one party. Okay, so think about it with the legal mind. Two groups come together, they make a contract, and then when you repudiate something, it just means that you're saying, okay, I don't want to be in this anymore. Whereas from a legal standpoint, what we wanted to see was the rescinding of the Papal Bulls, which really means then the legal contract is cut. So what we have now is, and don't get me wrong, I think it's a great achievement for all of us who have been working for years in this area, but we also must be aware that there's an element of, I'd like to say, it's like nice nasty. It's nice in that the language is affirming our intention being redressed, if you will, in terms of the doctrines of discovery, but at the same time, it has no legal structure underneath it, so that the legal aspect of it is something we have to continue to work forward. Now, having said all of that, I do want to acknowledge all of our indigenous brothers and sisters who have been working for decades. I mean, decades for this, at least to get to this point. But I also want to go back to where I started in the beginning. This also gives us an opportunity. And I know that Ruben and Dr. Wallace, Nana Karantama, and of course you, brother, Makua. I mean, we've been working, and also the awareness of who we are that transcends and goes beyond this structural concept that was meant to divide and conquer. And I think that's very critical in this conversation, that we don't lose sight of that, because there is an already established continuum of time and civilizations and indigenous civilizations where we had a way of understanding the world around us and how we engaged in that. Doesn't mean we always did it right, but we had a foundation built on that. And I think that's what, to me, as I look at the progression that's happening in these conversations, I just want us not to be fooled by that distinction between repudiation and recension.
Thank you for that feedback, Audrey. That's a great thing to help us really reflect on and put this in context for that sake. I would love to invite Dr. Wallace as well, if you have some remarks or some insights to share, just as we kind of begin to read through this document. Anything occurring?
First, I want to thank you for the invitation. it kind of is my karma that it would be last minute, since I'm known as someone who does lots of things at the last minute. As a matter of fact, Dr. LaFrancis Rogers Rose, who's put forth some very important cultural principles, among the things that she talks about when she discusses them is the way in which, last minute parties emerge. And so this is I'm known for last minute parties. And so this is kind of a last minute celebration of the progress that has been made, while at the same time, as Audrey pointed out, it's just one major marker in the road, which is a decades-long road. As she explained, that indigenous people have been working along this journey. And so this is an important marker. But the idea is that we have many more miles to go in terms of the goal of wanting the Vatican, the Pope, to embrace the language and goal of rescinding, as well as the way in which it will be up to nation states and such as the United States to work toward eliminating the impact of the Doctrine of Discovery on the way in which the lands of the indigenous people here in this country were appropriated and taken, and what's codified legally because of these doctrines. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and there's a need for collaboration to also occur, so that we really need our legal partners to be involved in this as well. As a clinical psychologist, yes, I've talked about, and as a matter of fact, the paper that I attached and that you also attached when you sent out the invitation, Makua, is something that I once presented at a conference that LaFrancis Roger Rose's International Black Women's Congress had held. This paper really talks about how there has been globally a global post-traumatic stress disorder that follows from over 500 years of oppression since the Papal Bulls that are known as the Doctrine of Discovery were released in 1452, 1455, 1493. And part of what you see the Vatican doing is pointing toward a I don't know if it's 1567, but a 1500s document where they seem to have talked about, acknowledgement of some of the wrongs that followed and attempting to create some kind of fix. So I think that part of what's in that document is a kind of manipulation or a kind of presentation of the history that's also trying to say that the Papal Bulls, such as that from 1493 and the subsequent message to, Portugal, you can have what's on this side of the, of the globe, and Spain, you can go ahead and conquer what's on the other side, attempting to say that these were political manipulations that were made. Again, kind of avoiding a responsibility. And saying that instead they were used as political documents. But I think it's really important. I was talking to someone just last week who had visited Ghana and talked about visiting the castles on the coast, where after capture and being marched in chains for miles to the ocean, that they were kept, our brothers and sisters, our ancestors were kept in cages. And as someone who is involved in the church, he's dealing with the very deeply disturbing image of seeing a church that was built right above. And he talked about how could those who were worshiping in those churches not smell the stench coming from right below, from the captured slaves who were forced to be in absolutely horrid conditions. And then I think about, an image that Nana Karantama had shared many, many years ago that was emblazoned in my mind, of a bishop, kind of sending blessings, the whole enterprise, as there's a line of slaves below. So it's not sufficient to kind of characterize the impact of these papal bulls and the Doctrine of Discovery as something that was manipulated politically, by monarchs, by governments in places like Spain and Europe, and then by the Dutch and the British, to justify their involvement in the enslavement of people, of the peoples of Africa. That there really should be a really kind of direct responsibility, and that we need to have in all of our minds what I call an acknowledgement of the root causes of the causes, so that for my students who are here, they've all, except for Stephanie, who's a new student, have been exposed to writings where I talk about a very simple formula of A over B, where A represents those in a position of superiority and how they thrust others into a position B of inferiority. So part of what you see in the document that was released Thursday was a reference to kind of ending all cultural superiority, all notions of cultural superiority, kind of rejecting that. However, what I'd like my students to know, and what's in that document that was disseminated, is the concept that when we talk about health disparities today, when we talk about low-income communities, when we talk about things like the alcoholism or the suicide rates that we see on the forced relocation onto reservations by Native American people, when we see all sorts of inequities in health, in economic status across the globe for indigenous people everywhere, that everyone needs to know that there are causes behind the causes, and that the absolute root cause goes back to these papal bulls of 1490, of 1452, 55, and 93. And that because of the influence and the way that the church, through these papal bulls, made it very clear that if you go to any land, if you do not encounter Christians there, you have every right and permission of the church to enslave them, to view them as brutes, to view them as less than human. You have basically explicit permission from the church to take their lands and to remove all the resources from those lands, and to use language like perpetual, slavery, like it can go on forever, and to use words like vanquish, a vanquishing violence. Then when you look at people today, and so for my son, Isaac Kumi, in Ghana, when he looks around and wonders, well, I watch TV and I see videos of all this wealth, around the world, why is it that my brothers and sisters have trouble with employment? It goes back to these papal bulls and the way in which Europe underdeveloped Africa. It goes back to a permission given to the Portuguese, given to Spain, given to the Dutch, given to the British, to literally go and conquer lands, enslave the people, take all the gold, all the wealth, so that nobody like Isaac Kumi or his brothers and sisters, can feel bad or diminished by not having wealth, if they understand the root causes of the causes, and they understand that they are really part of a global post-traumatic stress. In other words, there has been trauma. And what is post or after that trauma of over 500 years of racism and oppression? It's that the field upon which you play to put bread in your mouth is uneven. It is an uneven playing field. And when my students at Teachers College wonder, as Dr. Mutis does, about how they can address oral health disparities, since Dr. Mudis is a dentist seeking an additional doctorate in health education, which is a reflection of the depth of her commitment to equity in health. That part of what Dr. Mudis has to understand is that the health disparities we see today go back to the Papal Bulls of 1452, 55, and 93. And so the other side of all of this is that as someone who's been a part of academia where I have dealt with, racial microaggressions, and of course, this is something that Dr. LaFrancis Rogers Rose could also talk about, and the impact of these racial microaggressions. There are times that the anger has to just be let go. Because there was a point where I acknowledged that I was only damaging my internal organs with the rage and the anger that I had. Even when I used to get off the subway in New York and have to walk 4 blocks to Teachers College Clem University, I had a mantra. I hate this place. I hate this place. Okay. And so part of what I had to do was to stop being the angry only Black faculty member in my department's, faculty meetings. And I had to actually go through, an experience that's called Landmark, where I had to switch my personal narrative from not letting go of the racism that I had witnessed to acknowledging that I had a platform for training global leaders. And so in releasing some of that anger and embracing that mission, part of what I teach my students is about this A over B, or the superiority versus inferiority dynamics. And what we need to know is that the healing mission that we all need to commit to, including unity and harmony, does involve acknowledging the trauma from all of this, and does involve acknowledging the root causes in these Papal Bulls. So I join with those such as Audrey, who were saying there is a role for yet more progress along this long road and journey, and using the language of rescinding them, and encouraging and working with the legal scholars who can also move toward changing the impact of these Papal Bulls in the United States, legal system, what the Supreme Court has decided, and things of that sort. So I'll leave it there. And just to say that as you let go of anger and embrace one's own healing, as well as embrace the goal of global healing, that there is also a role. The part of what's in this document is a request to be pardoned. And so when we talk about truth and reconciliation, the other side of all of this is how do we also consider how our health benefits when we do engage in pardoning others and forgiving others, but at the same time, we commit to social action for social justice, for more change and more progress.
Remarkable feedback there, getting to the root cause of the causes. That's exactly right. And thank you for articulating that so clearly for us, and also for indicating those particular Papal Bulls that are in the context of this current situation that we still, find ourselves after 500 years of a timeline still encumbered by around the world, and making that very plain. Thank you so much for that. I want to invite Ruben to offer some remarks as well, given that this is something happening sort of along the lines of converging timelines of activities. So the fact that this is happening now is certainly no coincidence, as we tend to get a more eagle-eye view on certain timelines. There are waves of evolving consciousness that I think are also accompanying this shift. And I think Ruben can maybe speak to some of that And then we'll go back to the document because I do want to continue reading through it just for the audience to have a real clear understanding. And I'll also bring up some of those particular papal bulls that Dr. Wallace was referring to specifically. But Ruben, feel free to go ahead and offer some remarks, if you could, to this subject. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Maku, and thank you everyone present in the call. Such an honor to be here with elders like Mama Audrey and Dr. Barbara to speak about this and to really speak from the heart about this. I think and feel that as they made very clear, we want this open heart to bring this reconciliation and this forgiveness, and at the same time we have to acknowledge the need for a recognition on what has been happening and how this intricate tapestry of civilization and society has been affected by these bulls and these scripts from old programs, because these bulls are they kind of write the story of what this society has turned into. So it's like from 1452 onwards, we can see a progressive buildup of these bulls and these decrees that create the beds, the legal and spiritual seeding bed for all these aspects of society, like modern law and the structures of the judicial system and commercial law, and it's been like a story that has been creating more and more constraints for the human being to really flourish and to reach this state of equal opportunity and balance with nature that we have been striving to for years to achieve. So honoring also not only those here in the call, but all these generations of indigenous peoples and peoples from these affected communities who have been really dealing with the trauma of or the post-traumatic stress disorder, like Dr. Barbara so well articulated. Since this vote has been executed, we need to realize that we, in our DNA, we carry all those memories, we carry all this information, we carry the responsibility to turn around the script. And of course, it's so important to acknowledge that these bulls have a legal stand on today's legal system, and that as in the legal system, the words are so important to really describe what is needed or what is taking place. The difference between the word rescinding and refuting or condemning are very, very big, because one implies the will and the followed by an action. We have heard that apologies without unchanged behavior are just manipulation. So it is today brings us an opportunity to make all of this conscious in a safe space, in a sacred space, and also be aware that in that in the other reality of the world right now, which is loaded with so many challenges taking place. Well, these structures that have been implanted for centuries are still creating more of that disharmony and more of that inequality that we have been addressing during this call. So fortunately, because all creation is spiritual and viewed with spirituality, we are here as vehicles to redeem what has happened without bypassing it, without giving like just a green card, but making all those involved accountable, either by deed or by thought, in the continuation of these structures. So it is my intention that Pope Francis and everyone in the Catholic Church who have been part of this process of reconciliation, that is great that we now have exact milestones to track. This gathering in 2014, including our petition to rescind the Gregorian reform, we haven't had come to that stage because we are aware that once the first bull falls and this legal tapestry starts to crumble or dissolve and be replaced by natural law, not by artificial man-made law, we are going to experience like miracles, and forgiveness will be available because the opportunities and the future that can open by the actual factual recognition that this has been a big mistake from these spiritual authorities, that there is now we are ready as a species to evolve into the next stage of our evolution. And this is where the calendar and time ties in with everything that we have been discussing. It's what has been taking place in space, the claiming of the land, the material possession, and then the claiming of the belief systems and the implantation of a foreign religion, and then the implanting of a calendar, which is how these communities used to organize and come together for ceremonies with the earth, with the seasons, with the cosmos. And fortunately, thanks to all these wisdom keepers, we are still today able to hold that delicate thread of continuity of memory and the vision of a brighter future for the coming generations, especially because the time is critical now. We all know it, we all feel it, and it's ripe. And we have been, fortunately, with you, Brother Makua, we have been addressing this for years. We actually had a similar conversation exactly on April Fool's Day 2018, 5 years ago, which happens to be, according to this Maya time science, a harmonic of every 5 years we go through a synchronization process of 5 orbits of the Earth around the sun is equal to 7 cycles of gestation, or 7 sacred calendar of 260 days. So we are right now in that same cycle, which happens to be the 13-day cycle that is governed or commanded by the energy of Ben, or Akati, or what is considered the 13 Nahual in all the Mesoamerican calendars. The day-to-day is connected to the prophetic historical figure known as Seacatl Topistin Quetzalcoatl. And we were having this similar conversation, and exactly 5 years ago was Resurrection Sunday, April 1st, which happens to be also known as April Fools. So we had a profound, because I was re-listening to our conversation of 5 years ago and see the progress of how this is bubbling to the surface, and especially the subject of the root of the cause of the problems that we are, or the challenges that we are facing right now, are these Papal Bulls, are because these are the original scripts that keep in place the same structure that is really at the root of the injustice. So it is important to make this conscious, because April Fools and the release of this statement for that date, it can be taken as it's a joke. It's really, it's not the real intention to repair the damage. Is just a diplomatic way to say we are sorry, but that's the best we can do. And we are aware that the consciousness from today is not the same consciousness from 500 years ago, when these balls were drafted and crafted and instituted. And because of that, this is the time and the opportunity for the spiritual authorities that are holding these structures in place to really let go of these contracts that are binding all humanity to a slavery system. We have lost control of our lands, our resources, our belief systems, our minds, and our time. And it's time to recover all those sovereign rights that we, as creatures of creation, are worthy of enjoying and sharing with all humanity. So what prophecy gives us, that container of opportunity to redeem this, make it conscious, and trust that this process that seems to take very long, because this is generations. We are just really right now walking on the shoulders of the giants who have walked this path for years, and open the way for us to really turn the table and flip the script. And this flipping of the script has to do with changing the laws that are in place through these bulls, and replacing them with intelligent systems and ancient spiritual wisdom that we have put like on our room, and we only seldomly have the opportunity to bring to the surface, and spread the wisdom of that our ancestors left to navigate these times with grace, and with the ability to know that our minds and our imagination is more powerful than anything, and that from there we can create like a wave that can really flip this script for the benefit of all generations to come on this planet. This has been like since 2020, we have been under an initiation, a collective rite of passage, and I think that with this, especially with the events that have been taking in the last year, the apology on Day Out of Time, the passing of the prior Pope on December 31st, 2022, right at the end of the calendar year of the Gregorian calendar, that we are at the threshold of a new, entirely new reality, and that the more we gather to make this conscious, and the more we are able to trust the process, that this is going to this is in the noosphere, in this conversation, and those people who with the ears to hear and the eyes to see will will receive this message and make the changes and take the actions that we need right now to really shift the narrative of what we have been offered for years, and that we still see in the news and mainstream media, but that we know in our hearts and because of the confirmation from spirit through time, that we are flipping the script one day at a time, one word at a time, but this is really happening. And the belief in that and coming out of the of victimhood and into this freedom of this feeling of freedom, that we are just a few centimeters away from real freedom once these structures fall apart, because it's the time. It's like they were not built to last because they are not supported by nature. They are not supported by natural law. So this is the time to really welcome a new way of organizing ourselves, a new way of perceiving the cosmos, and a new way to really rekindle our relationship with the earth and with each other through the space that is being opened right now for healing. Miracles can happen in so fast. We can, but we need the willingness of those authorities. So please, if you can continue reading the document, because it's so important just to wrap this conversation and observe everything, take everything with a grain of salt, and with the benefit of the doubt. It's always always important to give the opportunity for change. We understand that there has been a manipulation of consciousness on Earth, and that some of these persons and beings have been also victims of a disharmonious system, and that even though they may not have done what is needed, they will have to at some point. They know that actually Pope Francis said a few years ago when he was visiting Mexico, please pray for me, because he has a big responsibility on his shoulders right now of really create the conditions for real reconciliation and real repair of the damage.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Can I make just
Yes.
on that? Thank you so
Sure.
much, Ruben and Dr. Wallace. One of the things that came to me as you were talking, Ruben, was a prophecy that was given by Baba Credo Mutwa when we were in South Africa, gosh, quite a while ago. But Baba said that this time was coming, and that there would be signs of the time. And I won't go into all of that. But what I think is significant here is he was saying that the mothers of Central Africa, the Amazon and around the planet, representing the indigenous people of the planet, that these mothers are already equipped with the knowledge that will birth the new way. And so as I'm listening to the conversation here today and thinking about the Papal Bulls, I think on the one hand, because the Papal Bulls, it's from a legal standpoint, you look into, the church law, the public law, and law was really a divisive form of governance that has done more damage than good in terms of the total of humanity. But what I was hearing from you was very encouraging, and I wanted to make sure that I put a little exclamation point on it. Not that it's necessary, but I just wanted to make sure is that, there are three things that typically when I travel with indigenous elders that they talk about. One is time, space, and then they talk about life. And so in time is that shifting to when we shift into that time where we are more aligned with the natural time, then it affects our psyche. It heals us and allows us transcendence. Space, when we come into an understanding that we are not outside of time and space, but rather we are a part of the web, then we begin to look beyond our individual selves to see how we are in relationships with all of life. And then with a conscious awareness of that, we begin to align. One of the things that they would often say is time, space, and dominion. Well, dominion is often mischaracterized in the sense that means that we have dominion over, but that truly comes from that psyche that led to the doctrines of discovery and so forth. But in an indigenous context, the idea of dominion is the fact that we are all connected and we are all one, and so we take care of each other. We work to there's no separation between the earth and humanity and all the different layers. Is that there's one symphony, if you will. So I wanted to say that, and also to leave with, as we think about the doctrines of discovery, and I know, McCoy, you're getting ready to go into more detail, I want us to also just hold in our mind that this was a structure, an artificial structure created to overmine the natural structure that has already been given to us. And so while we want to see the Papal Bulls rescinded, that means that we have an association with that contract. And I want you to hear me, because this is really important for us to hear. We have a choice in being a part of that in relationship with this contract, or deciding that, wait a minute, this contract really isn't what will be for the good of our planet, of all life. So therefore, we must choose what is the alternative contract, so that our freedom doesn't come from the rescinding of the Papal Bulls if the consciousness that brought it forward still exists. Our freedom comes from us awakening to the truth of who we are. And I'll leave with the one question that comes from every time I'm in community with the elders, no matter where I am in the world, is who are you? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mama Audrey, for sure, for that clarification and for that very important question, because it's not that these Papal Bulls, as you're saying, they don't define us. That's up to us. We get to define that. And we get to be conscious of what contracts we make now and going forward, because it does seem that everything is a decision as we go along. I will go ahead and reshare screen just to bring this up, because you all have shared so much, so powerfully, that this has just been very, very important. Thank you each for all that you have been sharing. I'll continue to read from this point 5 from the statement issued by the Holy See, the Catholic Church, a couple of days ago. Number 5, it is in this context of listening to indigenous peoples that the Church has heard the importance of addressing the concept referred to as the, quote, Doctrine of Discovery, end quote. The legal concept of discovery was debated by colonial powers from the 16th century onward, and found particular expression in the 19th century jurisprudence of courts in several countries, according to which the discovery of lands by settlers granted an exclusive right to extinguish, either by purchase or conquest, the title to or to be found or possession of these lands by indigenous peoples. Certain scholars have argued that the basis of the aforementioned doctrine is to be found in several papal documents, such as the Bulls Dum Diversus, 1452, Romanus Pontifex, 1455, and Inter Caetera, 1493. And as Ruben mentioned, instead of talking about getting our ducks in a row, It's about getting our bulls in a row here in terms of how we're aware of them, and not to elicit the subtle violence of a notion of getting your ducks in a row, but to recognize that these are the culprits. These are the scripts, as Ruben indicated, operating in the background. And so I want to also share then a bit more specifically what those three bulls actually state, because it's important to note that. It's important to understand the content of these bulls to the letter, according to what was initially scripted and concretized. So Dum Diversas in 1452, it is English for until different, is a papal bull issued on the 18th of June, 1452 by Pope Nicholas V. It authorized Alfonso V of Portugal to conquer Saracens and pagans and consign them to, quote, perpetual servitude. Pope Calixtus III reiterated the bull in 1456 with Inter Caetera, not to be confused with Alexander VI bull of the same title, renewed by Pope Sixtus IV in 1481 and Pope Leo X in 1514, with precise, pardon my Latin pronunciation, Precels denotionis, English especially the description. The concept of the consignment of exclusive spheres of influence to certain nation states was extended to the Americas in 1493 by Pope Alexander VI with Inter Caetera. Romanus Pontifex, 1455. Romanus Pontifex, from the Latin, the Roman Pontiff, are papal bulls issued in 1436 by Pope Eugenius IV and in 1455 by Pope Nicholas V, praising Catholic King Alfonso V of Portugal for his battles against the Muslims, endorsing his military expeditions into Western Africa, and instructing him to capture and subdue all Saracens, Turks, and other non-Christians to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery. The church leaders argued that slavery served as a natural deterrent and Christianizing influence to barbarous behavior among pagans. As a follow-up to the bull Dum Diversas, the church leaders now took positions aside the crown of Portugal that it was entitled to dominion over all lands south of Cape Bojador in Africa. The bull's primary purpose was to forbid other Christian kings from infringing the King of Portugal's practice of trade and colonization in these regions, particularly amid the Portuguese and Castilian competition for ascendancy over new lands discovered. And as that were not enough, you have the Inter Caetera of 1493, this triumvirate of bulls that seem to work together. Inter Caetera, among other works, was a papal bull issued by Pope Alexander VI on the 4th of May, 1493, which granted to the Catholic monarchs, King Ferdinand II of Aragon and Queen Isabella I of Castile, all lands to the west and south of a pole-to-pole line 100 leagues west and south of any of the islands of the Azores or the Cape Verde Islands. So I wanted to speak those because that's very specific as to the nature of what they were scripting for the people of the world, clearly. I'll go on to say 6. This is again from the document released by the Holy See a couple of days ago. Number 6, the Doctrine of Discovery is not part of the teaching of the Catholic Church. Historical research clearly demonstrates that the papal documents in question, written in a specific historical period, are linked to political questions, have never been considered expressions of the Catholic faith. At the same time, the Church acknowledges that these papal bulls did not adequately reflect the equal dignity and rights of indigenous peoples. The Church is also aware that the contents of these documents were manipulated for political purposes by competing colonial powers in order to justify immoral acts against indigenous peoples that were carried out at times without opposition from ecclesiastical authorities. It is only just to recognize these errors. It is only just to recognize these errors, acknowledge the terrible effects of the assimilation policies and the pain experienced by indigenous peoples, and ask for pardon. Furthermore, Pope Francis has urged, never again can the Christian community allow itself to be infected by the idea that one culture is superior to others, or that it is legitimate to employ ways of coercing others. Interesting choice of words. 7. In no uncertain terms, the Church magisterium upholds the respect due to every human being. The Catholic Church therefore repudiates those concepts that fail to recognize the inherent human rights of indigenous peoples, including what has become known as the legal and political doctrine of discovery. 8. Numerous and repeated statements by the Church and the popes uphold the rights of indigenous peoples. For example, in the 1537 Bull Sublimis Deus, Pope Paul III wrote, quote, "We define and declare that the said Indians and all other people who may later be discovered by Christians are by no means to be deprived of their liberty or the possession of their property, even though they be outside the Christian faith, and that they may and should freely and legitimately enjoy their liberty and possession of their property, nor should they be in any way enslaved. Should the contrary happen, it shall be null and have no effect." And 9. More recently, the Church's solidarity with indigenous peoples has given rise to the Holy See's strong support for the principles contained in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The implementation of those principles would improve the living conditions and help protect the rights of indigenous peoples, as well as facilitate their development in a way that respects their identity, language, and culture. Okay, so I wanted to simply read out the scripts, the literal scripts, as we've been talking about these particular papal bulls. And I think it's very revealing when we actually read the language, at least translated out of the Latin into English. We get a better sense of what they were being used to create, what they were scripting and making such suggestions or assertions. With that said, I know we've been talking to this point of understanding that it's not enough to simply apologize, that is an important step in the process of ultimately recognizing and rescinding the impacts, the effects of this, and really putting it to task to challenge the current legal structure, as it were, because it is based largely upon these scripts. But I would like to turn the question back to you, panelists, just to inquire, what are in your minds, some of the next steps that we can take in this process? Because as we said, this has been released publicly a couple of days ago. It's something that many hubs like ourselves are probably taking into conversation and contemplation. And I'm just curious to know what rises up in each of you. And I'll ask Audrey first, and we can go down the line. But to ask you, in terms of next steps, what rises up in you as something that we, the people, can do to continue to advance the effort towards an actual official rescinding and revoking of the doctrine of discovery and those attendant papal bulls?
There are a couple of tracks that I think we need to be aware of. One is we need continue with the legal team and maybe enhance that even more so, because if we're trying to create a global construct in which we can live and breathe and be whoever it is that we feel we are here to be, then we have to have a legal construct that allows that. I think one of the things that we have to be careful about is that we make a lot of assumptions without realizing that unless something legally changes, you really haven't changed the construct. So, so we need a team that's working on that. And I think the other track that I think is so important is we need to have even more. I mean, we've had a great emergence of this, but we need to begin to learn more about our indigenous ways, the origins, how we began, how did we live before, how did we break away from all this differentiation by age, by sex, by, you know, everything you can think about we're separated by. How can we begin to have a whole human consciousness that puts us in relationship with the earth? I think that's critical, because if you read back over those statements you made that were made by the announcement, one of the things, there's a lot of hidden language in that. And again, that comes back to us understanding legalese. I'll just mention two. It talked about how important this was for the fraternity of whatever, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know, of course, fraternity on one hand means a gathering of people, but in a modern context, we tend to look at fraternity as a male organization or a group of males. And so we have to realize that in this construct, and I know we're talking about the Papal Bulls, I'm not really getting off, but what I'm trying to say is we have to look deeper at the languaging. And so it's still creating a sort of male dominance perspective, and that's not putting anyone down. It's just a very strong, right now, the energy of the mother is coming forward, whether we're talking about the earth of humanity. So we need to realize that there's an effort to sustain an old paradigm that is dead. It's not dying, it's dead. And it's evidenced by so much that's happening around us. So number two, the other thing that we have to understand, the other part of the language that I heard was a reference to indigenous people as being something different. So you have to really listen to the languaging that's being used. And so it still relegates indigenous people to me, what feels like maybe perhaps a more inferior relationship than, say, the Europeans or the sources that led to the doctrines of discovery. And then last of all, we need to look at how there's such an effort in the language to separate the church out of taking responsibility for the Papal Bulls that it did create, that there was a definite relationship between church and state, the monarchies, to actually go out and conquer the world and get rich, period. I mean, that's very simplified. So we need to have a legal team that's continuing to work on the legal documents of site so that we're dealing with real legal outcomes. It's easy for people to say, oh, this, you know, we had this repudiation of the Papal Bulls, and not realize that has no legal merit at all. So I just want us to be smart, to be listening, but to also, in the final, again, what I said before, there is a new age that is emerging. And we are the ones that are giving birth to this new age. And so we must make sure we don't fill ourselves with so much time trying to do things that have really already become obsolete, that we're not coming together to think about, okay, what comes next? Who are we, and what is our role in creating the new earth, the next iteration of this time cycle, and what that has already been prophesized to be? How do we align with that? And at the same time, I'm saying that I want us to be aware. I am fully aware. I've been on the ground. You know, I'm fully aware of the challenges that our people, indigenous people, are suffering. Whether you're looking at what's happening in the Amazon, you're looking at what's happening where there's mining, you know, great valuable resources and on reservations and in indigenous grounds around the world. So you have to be grounded in that, but we also have those three tracks. You know, we got to deal with the legal, we got to deal with who are we, and then we got to deal with how do we begin to mobilize in consciousness and in the actions that we take to move forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Dr. Wallace, I'll ask you the same question. What do you identify as some of the next steps? And it's okay if it's redundant, it's all good, or if there are other complementary next steps that you have an insight on. We'd love to hear that.
Well, I don't think I have to repeat some of the really powerful things that Audrey already said, but I will segue directly into something that I regularly do when I'm teaching, which is that I always ask, in attempting to expand awareness, cultural competence, cultural humility, who are you? So it's kind of interesting that that's something that I've been doing for a couple of decades now. However, when I ask, who are you? I'm teaching an acronym, ARE. And the challenge is, are you someone who's capable of interacting with all of the diverse peoples of the world? Are you someone capable of interacting with anyone who is different from you with A, acceptance, respect for the R, and E is for the empathy? So the next steps that I would specifically recommend would be increasing awareness about the root causes of the causes, to continue to spread awareness about how our fundamental notions of hierarchy and domination and oppression and who is superior and who is inferior go back to these Papal Bulls. And yes, there is some avoidance of responsibility that we see in the points that you read. But what's important is that we take up the challenge to become aware ourselves and to spread awareness so that other people can begin to shift in consciousness. So that would be the second thing that I would recommend, that there needs to be a widespread shifting of consciousness so that, consistent with the new paradigm, that we are all capable of interacting with what I call a non-hierarchical equality. No one is above, no one is below, that we interact with everyone with equality, a sense of, in the paradigm of equality. And so that's where we have moved from that old paradigm of A over B, or of hierarchical domination and oppression, to a new paradigm of A equals B, or non-hierarchical equality, where we're all equal. And what we need to have to guide us is a sense, an answer to the question, who are you? Okay. And the answer ideally is, I'm someone with this expanded consciousness who is consciously interacting with others to make sure that I'm not replicating these dynamics of domination and authority, that I'm someone capable of acceptance of everyone's who is different from me, that I can engage with them with respect, a genuine respect, and that as we engage in dialogue, I can have empathy for your experience. So yes, the legal actions are imperative, but so is our healing. And so this awareness and this shift in consciousness is also a fundamental part of our healing, because, you know, part of the post-traumatic slave trauma that we're facing globally, sometimes there is this collusion. We collude, we act in concert with those who have perpetrated slavery and colonialism. And we, you know, the saying goes that, you know, you don't really have to enslave some people today because of their mentality. They're enslaving themselves. They're reenacting dramas of being inferior, of allowing themselves to be abused, because they are not conscious of how there is this drama that's been going on for over 5 centuries, and that their roles have been ascribed, and there's been learning and powerful conditioning so that people will fall into line and fall into and assume a role. So my 2 steps would be, let's spread this message to increase awareness, and let's support people's healings and challenge them with the question, who are you? And ideally working collectively and collaboratively so that we are aligned with this new paradigm of equality. And that we give energy and support to the legal scholars who may have the biggest role to play in various nation states in extracting the influence in common law, and then also to support the indigenous people all around the world with their healing, and also in discerning what steps are appropriate to demand this rescinding.
Wonderfully, wonderfully stated. Thank you so much. And I would like to, I just love that. Who are you? Acceptance, respect, empathy. That's the that's the ground floor of this next evolutionary wave that we're all collectively dreaming into and generating and creating together. So thank you so much for that. Ruben, I'll ask you the same thing. Do you have any reflections with regard to next steps that you perceive? And I'd also like to point out, I know one interesting synchronicity we may want to speak to is the fact that today, of all days, marks, in this time tracking work, we're always seeing these interesting layers. But today is specifically a carryover from the bombing of Nagasaki, August 9th, 1945. Maybe you can explain that a little bit, but then also just share any closing insights you may have as well for next steps.
Thank you, and thank you for, again, I was nodding throughout Audrey's and Barbara speech because I agree 100% and on those priorities. Probably I will only add to that because we created this Council for Calendar Awareness because we realize the need to bring this awareness to those millions and millions and millions of people who have never even questioned the how we got to this point, who are just on autopilot, like repeating the script. We are starting Easter season next week, so it's part of the program. We are either we want it or not, we have to go through the program. Is really how graceful can we walk that path, and how we can bring this awareness to the new generations who have not been traumatized, because it takes a while, it takes some energy to really process, integrate, and really free up our consciousness from the trauma. So those the new beings that are coming to the planet, even though we carry all this in our DNA, we can offer them tools and ways that they can become the harbingers of the shift. They can teach the adults. Everything is kind of flipping around, not just the script, but the way that we learn has been also misinterpreted, because we only think that we can learn from the elders or from the books or from the people who have studied a lot, but we can learn a lot from the new generations if we really tap in the messages that they are coming with. We just need to create really the conditions for them to be and become what they are here to bring at this point of our evolution. The same way that probably our generations we are the articulating link or the bridge in between the analog society and the digital world, and we were able to go through these rapid technological shifts. We right now have also the fortune to bring the new spiritual technologies, not the traditional technology of the machine, but the spiritual technologies to the forefront, so that we can expedite this process. So it's really, we need to become martial artists of to navigate these times, and really be wise enough to read in between the lines of these scripts that we are being offered and rewrite them with our consciousness, with our awareness, with our normalization, because this is so important in the awareness process. Normalize having these conversations, normalize speaking about the calendars and the justice that we see in the world with our kids, with our relatives, so that we can really allow what has happened to sink in and create space for the new to emerge. Once we really are able to integrate and redeem all the trauma, there's a new container, a new space for spirit to fill it in with miracles. Really, we just need to hold space for this transformation. I think that the next steps are just keeping that that sense of awareness alive every day with our every interaction with all human beings. I love what the who are you? I think it's going to be a new mantra for myself and for the people who I can share with. And well, and the final point would be yet to change our minds by changing our calendar. This doesn't require a big shift. It's really a matter of like riding a bike or like learning a new skill. It's just day by day, one step forward. We can lose track and fall, and but just the intention of really tuning our minds to a harmonic melody that is playing in the background, that is coordinating all the events, all the good, the bad, the ugly, and what we tend to label as dark or light. It's all woven by this intelligence. And if we tap into the intelligence, we are just becoming vehicles for that intelligence to keep expressing and create like a quantum shift in real time. These scripts that we have been programmed with are just scripts. Really, the moment that we take our power away from them and we focus, as Mama Audrey said, in building the new. Doesn't matter if they rescind the bull or not. We keep working on the new solutions, the new structures, the new ways, so that everything is in place and it's going to happen right at the perfect time, so that when these all structures break down, as they are breaking down, there is a new safety net of consciousness, really, that can hold space for this huge birth of a new humanity that we are going through, and that is we are in basically in the labor room right now. It's like this going through this process of acknowledging what is happening and having to revisit these chapters, dark chapters of humanity, and read these documents that are loaded with powerful words, like Mama Audrey said. Like, we need to be really careful how we are unconsciously sponsoring more inequality between the masculine and the feminine. And look at the word papa. Papa is how kids call their dads. So this the misperception of the masculine based on this language that has been created to unconsciously perpetuate structures of power that are dominant and are completely void of the divine masculine energy, and infusing that energy into those spaces and places and aspects of our society is making that shift, that quantum shift, real. We're basically, Jose Arguelles, when in the manifesto for the noosphere, said something that around the lines, paraphrasing, when we are really aware of the mega crisis that we are facing, we will realize that the most wise thing to do is to shift our consciousness to meet the crisis. So it's only through this shift in the awareness of victimhood to problem solving, to creating the new, that we are going to really shift the paradigm. And it doesn't matter if those who are in the positions of power shift it. We are not powerless. We can shift it one person at a time. But it would be amazing when this tidal wave, these efforts of millions of human beings who have worked for this liberation reach a critical mass, and we can see really exponential shifts happening in a very rapid period of time, where healing will happen very fast. And once the old structures are being uncovered, and that we can see that there is a whole natural system in place to hold the frequency of the new earth, the new time, new humanity. So thank you so much for the opportunity to have the conversation, and finally to address the question of, yeah, we are today it's a very special intersecting node in the fabric of time space, because according to the new time, these harmonics that we measure of 260 days, on a day like today, took place the second nuclear event directed against humanity in history, that it has the nuclear era just created like this timeline in which we seem to be running parallel, which is the timeline of the machine and entropy and fear. And right next to that timeline, we have the exact mirror. Today is a mirror day. It's in the Mayan time science. Is white rhythmic mirror, and and we can use opportunities like this to shift the quantum in and redeem the events that happen on moments that have had the same frequency. So just by having this conversation, just by acknowledging this, by making it conscious, we are redeeming that initial split of the matter that happened 78 years ago with these three events: Trinity, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki. Those three events are deeply connected to the new dispensation of time, because the harmonic convergence was organized precisely on the same day that Hiroshima took place, to revert in the same way as the matter was split, and we enter into divergence. To the harmonic convergence was the bringing back of all those pieces together to start the healing process. And since then, we are completing more and more and more milestones. We recently, 3 days ago, we completed 13,000 kin, or units of time in the Mayan time science system, from the harmonic convergence, and 13 is the number of completion within these cycles. So we are basically entering a new hologram of 13,000 days right now. We are in that first new days of a new 13,000 days. So we can write the script of those next 13,000 days in a new way, just by holding that intention in our hearts, in our minds, in our actions. This is the last point that I want to make. Just who are we, and are we aligned? Are we coherent? Are we what our thoughts, our feeling, and our actions, the three aspects of ourselves, the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual, are they aligned? I invite everyone just to make that contemplation every day. Is my body aligned? Is my actions aligned with what I'm saying? Or and in that way, we create like a coherent field we will live in a wonderful world where when everyone basically behaves in the same way that they express that they are going to behave. So that fits on also for the Catholic Church and the authorities who wrote that bulletin that we are observing. We are observing the shift taking place, and we will make sure that this shift takes place against all obstacles and all the different misuse of language and laws that have been perpetrated. So thank you so much for this opportunity, for this space, and such an honor to make it conscious right now at this point in time.
Thank you, Brother Ruben, as well. Thank you so much. And I'd like to turn it to the students or the other educators in the space, as I know we've had some guests sitting in on this conversation today in real time. And I would like to invite any of you that want to come online and share a few remarks as we wrap up. Feel free to come off of mute and go ahead and offer your insights or your thoughts as to this conversation today. Okay, Dr.
Yes.
Rogers-Rose, thank you.
Yes, I appreciate the analysis and the conversation. I think it took me back to some early organizing in the African American community back into the 50s, where you kind of understood, or somebody's, understood the existential part of what was happening to us. And then this whole process of making it clear to the people so that the people could then organize themselves. And so I just want to make sure that as we do the kind of analysis and the conversations that we're having, that we make sure that it is the masses that once they are galvanized, will make all of the changes that we want to see to come into the world. And I've been reflecting on that on a number of areas in my own life. But that Cabral says, tell the masses no lies and claim no easy victories. And to that extent, I think we move forward in this ongoing struggle to right the scales of justice. And I think just listening called me up to my early interactions with Russell Means when I was in Minnesota, and the whole movement of the indigenous people. And some of it had to be very activist in order to bring about some movements in this country. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your reflections. We appreciate your presence here. Thank you. And anybody else interested in sharing any closing remarks or any other observations of today's conversation? It's okay if not. I want to take the moment to thank all of the guests who have joined today. Mama Audrey Scott Williams, thank you so much. Dr. Barbara Wallace, thank you so much. Ruben Ginas, thank you so much. Nana Karantama, thank you for opening us up in such a good and sacred way. We truly appreciate your presence. And I haven't said it today, I don't think, but my name is Makua Ray, and it's an honor to be here with each of you and holding the space together that we can have these conversations and explore these important subjects with each other in such a coherent way. It's a true blessing. And I do feel it significant. I wanted to actually, in closing, invoke something from URI, actually, titled the Nuclear Prayer. And the reason I wanted to do this is, given the gravity of today being the 109th Zolkin, okay, the 260 day cycle, 109 of those since the detonation of Nagasaki on August 9th, 1945. So making that conscious, I wanted to share this in closing, if there are no other remarks from anybody. And then I'll go ahead and just share this prayer. The Nuclear Prayer. The beginning and the end are in your hands, O Creator of the universe, and in our hands you have placed the fate of this planet. We who are tested by having both creative and destructive power in our free will turn to you in sober fear and intoxicating hope. We ask for your guidance and to share in your imagination in our deliberations about the use of nuclear force. Help us to lift the fog of atomic darkness that hovers so pervasively over our Earth, your Earth, so that soon all eyes may see life magnified by your pure light. Bless all of us who wait today for your presence and to dedicate ourselves to achieve your intended peace and rightful equilibrium on earth. In the name of all that is holy and all that is hoped. Amen. Thank you. This was written by the Right Reverend William E. Swing, founder of the United Religions Initiative, URI, several years ago. I wanted to acknowledge that prayer as it is ever resonant, even today, given all that we are navigating as a planet in our collective consciousness and our collective unconsciousness. So making it conscious, making it sacred, making it creative, making it art, that is our mission here in this artful approach. So thank you again to everybody tuning in to this conversation. And please be encouraged to share this with others as we can help increase the awareness around this shifting tide that we are all navigating together. But again, to all of our guests this afternoon, thank you for being available at the last minute for this important dialogue. And it's a true honor. And we look forward to the next moments when we get to share time, space, and heart with each other. Okay, peace to all of you all around the world. And with that, we say in Lakesh. And so it is. Thank you.